Let's bring in Rogers Chair in the American Presidency at Vanderbilt University, historian Jon Meacham. Jon, good morning. Always great to see you. Thinking about the busts of Lincoln and Churchill in the Oval Office and those portraits of Washington and Lincoln and others staring down at the President of the United States yesterday as he answered questions about tweets posted by the richest man in the world in this very public feud, what they must have been thinking. What were you thinking as a historian as you watched this yesterday?
That Emerson was right. There is properly no history, only biography. Personalities here matter enormously. And President Trump has always been an exaggerated example of how one person's character, one person's vices and the view of his admirers, his virtues, affect all of us. And there is, as Ali was just saying, this is an enormously important piece of legislation. It could set certainly the next 3 years, perhaps beyond that, which is an enormous amount of time when you're talking about the power and scope of what the federal government does in people's lives. And the nature of that now is somewhat in the hands, somewhat in play because of this kind of billionaires, non-Brokeback Mountain moment. And so I think what we're looking at is legislatively a really, really interesting political question, which is, will Republican members of Congress find some courage in this, find some margin to oppose the president, to keep pushing on certain elements, because they now have someone else to be afraid of, right? So ordinarily, they're just afraid of the president and his remarkable connection to the MAGA base. But now you're looking at a situation where you have someone who has the capacity to put a lot of money behind a primary opponent. And there is no more fearsome verb in Washington than to be primaried. It's hard to conjugate that verb, but that is the central term. And if Elon Musk wants to roll that threat out, he can do it. He's shown he can do it. And so you're looking at a moment here at a particularly crisis hour for this big bill where there's a countervailing force not coming from the left, but coming from the Republic of Musk.
Well, it's been interesting to watch that exact question, even before this really blew up yesterday over the last couple of days, Jon, of, as the criticism from Elon Musk came in for this so-called big, beautiful bill, where would Speaker Johnson side? Where were these members of Congress, some of whom, by the way, had their reelection campaigns bankrolled by Elon Musk? Where would they come down on this? It seems, and Ali can talk about this too, for the most part, they're staying with Donald Trump, that the forces of MAGA are stronger than, I guess, the money and the primary threat that Elon Musk can bring. He's a relative newcomer to the MAGA movement. Just last year, kind of latching onto this is because he thought Donald Trump was going to become president. He was right about that. So what's your suspicion about where Republicans, Speaker Johnson has been pushing back hard against Elon Musk, which way they fall? They stay with the president or do they follow Elon Musk?
Well, I'm almost always wrong about the future. Not that, I try not to be wrong about the past, but I get some of that wrong too. My suspicion is that MAGA prevails over money in this particular battle. But for the first time, there have been two moments, right, where the Republicans who might not actually believe in what President Trump wants to do, there have been two factors that I think have given them some pause, maybe three. One would be falling poll numbers, right? The president's approval rating not being as high as it might room. Then there's now there's Musk, and then there's simply the calendar, which is 3.5 years is 3.5 years, and these folks, their calendar runs on their election cycle. The best way to tell where anyone is going to be, and this is not cynical, it's simply, as Abraham Lincoln said, all people act on incentive. The best way to know where someone's going to land on this bill or anything else President Trump wants to do is show us your primary electorate. show us the demography of your state, show us how the funding of your opponents might be, and we can probably 9 times out of 10, 9.8 times out of 10, find out where you're going to land because of that.
I like the dichotomy that you set up there, this idea of Musk over money or MAGA over money. I think that might be the way Republicans on Capitol Hill are thinking about it. But I think by and large yesterday, what we saw when they were asked about it was a lot of attempts to put some distance there. I don't know that they're ready to pick sides in the divorce. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to if I were them, because you do still have 3.5 years of the Trump presidency. You're watching all of these fissures within the MAGA movement, whether it's Steve Bannon now teeing off against Elon Musk. We know that they had disagreements on things like H-1B visas and other parts of the immigration program that the Trump administration was putting together. Obviously, electric vehicles and government subsidies towards that are another sticking point that are coming to a real head right here. So there's that. But then on the money piece of it, I think you're right. And I also don't know how to conjugate the primary. But the idea that you're going to get primaried has always been, and Lemire, you said this, the idea that Musk always had that in his back pocket, that he was the enforcer to the Trump agenda on Capitol Hill, that was always the extra oomph. And I think the extra insulation that Musk always had in the president's orbit is, whether he was in government or not, he was always the guy that would put some money towards their side, keep people in line legislatively. That's a big power on Capitol Hill. Maybe not to people like Thomas Massie, who sort of have their own permission structure in their own states, but to other members, the threat of a primary challenge really did help them bend towards the president's will. And so now, without that enforcement mechanism, and even without it, and even with it potentially working against them, that's going to be an interesting ecosystem for Republicans to play in. And it's why you're watching them kind of try to shy away from taking sides.
Yeah, Mike Johnson literally ran away from cameras yesterday. Others did as well.
Holding a very cute baby, though.
He did. There was sort of as a shield, I think. And Musk was certainly really very scattershot on Twitter yesterday, to say the least. But one thing he did say was that he would fund challenges to anyone who votes for this bill, like suggesting he would set up his own political party. We'll see about the follow through there, but it's a reminder about the sort of weapon that he has. And to Ali's point, though, there is a schism. I mean, Steve Bannon went so far as to say not only should the U.S. scuttle all government contracts with Musk, an idea that I will say Trump also floated. Bannon went so far as to say Musk should be deported. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But there is certainly here a potential for a real fracture that's going to reshape the Republican Party. Or
not.
We'll be on to something else tomorrow. I mean, that's just how fast yesterday went. I think we're all going to be glued to our phones again today for latest developments.
You're right. It's equally possible they'll hold a rally together tonight somewhere in the country. We shall see. All right, John.